Good morning, everyone. Wake up. It's Tuesday morning. You know, the first and third Tuesday, your favorite show is here from the ground up. Real time issues with real time solutions for MWBEs and small businesses, brought to you by Queen's Strategy Partners. And we are so excited to be here. Nicole Valentine, Esquire, our partner, my beautiful co host, Danielle Douglas, and myself, Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. We've been with you throughout all of 2020, through the pandemic, helping you get the resources that you need. And then we're in season 2, continuing the conversations around the issues that matter most to our MWBEs and small businesses. So we thank you so much for tuning in, for sharing your comments, for letting us know what has been helpful for you. And we look forward to telling you a little bit more, and I'll let my co-host do that, of what's coming in the future. But today is another great show. So here's the moment where I pause for you to go ahead and invite somebody to join the show. Tag them, repost, share this broadcast, because we're continuing a very important topic of how to structure your JV part 2. So you definitely want them to be a part of that. But right now, I get to do what I love the most on the show, which is introduce my beautiful, talented Bob.com boss lady co-host, the beautiful Danielle Douglas.
And as I always say, Miss Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant, how much I love you. You make me feel good on a Tuesday morning. Thank you. So we are excited about today's show. We have someone on the show today who's going to give you all the scoop on JVs. I mean, when we talk about he's a subject matter expert, he knows what he's talking about. So we are excited about today's show because we are going to be providing you a wealth of information. So, put on your seatbelts, get ready for the ride, because it's going to be fast and furious. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it back over to my co-host, Miss Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant, so she could introduce our fabulous host today.
Thank you so much, Danielle. So I'm excited. We get to bring another legal expert to the show. He grew up in St. Mary's Projects in the Bronx, New York, which he's very proud of, the BX home. I grew up there too. But he defied the odds of being a young African-American male living in the South Bronx by developing a disciplined work ethic as a student athlete while attending Fordham Prep High School. And that was where he received that foundation that prepared him for matriculation at Fordham University, and then later moving on to Hofstra Law School. He has been practicing for close to 30 years. He's an attorney who understands the importance of criminal defense, false arrest, police brutality, civil rights violations, immigration, contracts, employment law, trademark. So his resume is packed with some of the more prominent stories that hit the news, but he also does work for friends and colleagues in this area of business and contracting and understanding JVs. He's written a book. He's been a co-host on multiple shows. He's been a legal expert for a series, and he continues to develop his portfolio of work by being a lawyer for the people. He is on the streets, he is in the know, and he is determined to make his impact one that is felt globally because of what he has chosen as his profession of law, but what he can't escape, which is being a Black man. So we're just so excited that we have Royce Russell Esquire here as our legal expert today, as we're talking about how to structure your JV. We've been talking about collaboration. We've been talking about how do you come together? How do you figure out if you have the right partner, if this is the person that you want to be in business with? But there's some legal protections that you should be aware of as you're actually structuring and developing what that written contract, because we can talk all day, but if something happens or something goes left, what do you have to cover you in a legal document and to engage with a legal expert like Mr. Russell? So welcome to the show, Mr. Russell.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for all the accolades. You make me sound better than I actually am. And for that part of 30 years of practicing law, we want to retract some of those numbers in here. You know what I mean? We already got the gray showing, so let's peel back some of them years. You know what I mean?
I knew you were going to say that. I said almost 30. So that was the disclaimer.
Well, let's try almost 20, whatever. Let's, if we're going to fabricate, let's go down. Let's go up. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to retain an audience, not scare an audience.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to start with the first question, but I want to shout out Jason. Thank you so much for tuning in, being a part of the show today, my brother. All right, Danielle, over to you. Let's get into this conversation. How do we structure it? How do we protect ourselves?
Yeah, so our first question is, can you tell us about the different types of JVs? Informal, structured, what does that look like?
Well, look.
Wait, I'm sorry, Royce, and also the pros and cons for both.
Okay, so the one, I guess, phrase or quote that I'm going to use when you talk about types of JV is that it is very fashionable to hear what we call the spoken word. You know, we got all these little shops where people go and they hear the spoken word and they snapping their fingers and everybody's, great, 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 because it's the spoken word. Dealing with JVs, you want the written word. Spoken word really doesn't hold much weight. It only holds as much weight as you put in the faith with the other person. And why do I say that? Because when you talk about informal JVs, you're talking about what is informal about it. It's not the work that's being done. It's the structure for which it is being performed and how you operate. So folks come together all the time, to collaborate, to do certain things, to produce a product. And some of that is just like you help me, I help you, the old African way, the old barter system. That is what is akin to when you say one time, non-written, verbal versus anything that is written type of JV, joint venture. And so you have those. And the pros and cons to that is that it is a verbal contract. And, memory is very short in most people's minds as to what their roles were supposed to be, because we say were, because as we talk about pros and cons, we always want to keep in mind that there may always be a breach of some sort because someone is not holding up their end. And when you deal with a verbal one-time kind of collaboration, you think, oh, there's no problem. We'll just get this project done. And that's where the lawyers come in. And that's where you need to have the foresight to anticipate and predict that there will be problems. And the best way to resolve those problems is if it is written. So, one-time joint ventures, that is fine. But when you talk about whether or not the spoken word is better than the written word, I will always advise you to have the written word, right? And because it protects you in the long haul for any type of failure to hold one's responsibility, which we call a breach in some shape, form, or fashion. And once again, it is like the cord that keeps on bringing you back, right? When one goes off track in whatever venture they're trying to do, whatever assignment they have, the written document always brings you back and always brings the parties back. And when you're talking about profit, right, because no one does joint ventures and don't expect to receive compensation, you want to make sure that is clear as well. And so that's what the written document does. And as you said, one time, right, this is one event, that's it, is over. Most joint ventures, and I'll go a little further, just anticipating what our audience may want to understand, most joint ventures really are not focused on one-time events. They're focused on periods of time. And what do we mean by period of time? Two parties come together to service a third party, and they want to service that third party from December to December. Those two distinct entities or individuals, right? Because we usually think of joint ventures as far as entities. They can't be individuals coming together, right? But coming together in their business name, which makes it a joint venture to service a client. And each of those individuals or entities have a very distinctive attribute or product or service that they can provide, hence making the joint venture work. So rarely are they one time. In those type of cases, you might want to do what we call a work for hire. I contract you for this one project rather than become tied to you for this one project, whoever has the contact. But if it's over a period of time, contract driven, service driven for one client, where that client needs multiple services, then that's the best time to have it written and have a joint venture.
So I appreciate that you gave those breakdowns, because you can do it one time, but if you continue to move forward, and then there's sort of a hybrid, like Queen Strategy Partners, right? So we all have our individual businesses, but we've come together to do business together for long term. So just hearing that helps someone really understand, because we've had examples on the show where case studies, we had them featured, and they were thinking about opportunities where they could start with a one time, but maybe that grows into a longer relationship. So with that being said, when we think about coming to a legal expert, actually retaining an attorney for the conversation of anything that's past a one time, that we're really going to put what you said, the written word versus the spoken word, what sort of terms should you be thinking about when drafting that kind of document? And wouldn't it be helpful if you do that before meeting with the attorney, because those are billable hours?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on what side of the table you're on. If you're on my side of the table and I'm billing the hours, you can come in with 2 pieces of scrap paper and a crayon, and then we go from there. We'll work it out. We'll build it all the way up. But if you are sensitive to time and you're really trying to help the entities grow, if they're smaller business, smaller companies, you really need to have them do their due diligence. And from an attorney's perspective, you get a chance to see how much skin they have in the game and what they're trying to develop, because any agreement is a product of the clients before you, right? I can tell you some things about agreements, 30-day time to terminate, notice, what does that look like, whether it's written or whether it's by email or certified mail, but it's really what the parties want to do. I'm going to put a pin in there, and I want to go back to when you talked about Queen strategies, right? When you have a variety of entities coming together to provide a service, and this goes back to, I guess, the billable hours kind of, and coming to the attorney to talk through some of these things, you need to know that, one, you have a client base for that. And I'll repeat, you need to have a client base for that. I don't think it's in anyone's best interest to have 3 companies come together to then look for clients, because human nature will always have each entity looking over their shoulder to say, who is really trying to recruit clients for the collective, as opposed to recruit clients for their own business opportunities. So if I shine shoes and someone else sells shoelaces for the shoes, and we want to come together to have this one entity where we shine and lace, right? And we don't have a client base, who's to say that the person who starts shining the shoes are not out there looking just for clients for themselves on your time, right? On the time of the joint venture. So what you want to do is that in conceptualizing and having the joint venture and creating it, you want to definitely either have clients that you've already targeted or will target, and as a collective, you're going to make presentations, or have a client already in mind that is willing to hire one of the entities, but need more services than you can provide. And so I think that's critical, because joining together for some futuristic client can breed bad blood, because who is working harder to get that client collectively, noting that each one of you have your own business. So I think that's number one. Number two, as you spoke to, as much as you can have written down, whether you think it is appropriate or not, creates how we shape our day as far as the lawyer is concerned. And it allows for more questioning of the parties as to what they're really trying to receive. For instance, is this going to be a joint venture where profits are split 50-50? Versus, is this going to be a joint venture where we work for a client who may ask for multiple services, but at the start, they're asking for, let's say, Royce Russell services as an entity. Is that split 50-50, or is that split 70-30, where that entity under the joint venture receives 70% of the profit and the joint venture receives 30% of the profit from servicing that client? And that goes to the adage, when you think about joint ventures and whether or not that is fair, one could say it beats a blank, right? And what do we mean by it beats a blank? If you weren't in the joint venture, it is possible that that person would go service that client and retain 100% of the profits. So by being in the joint venture, and if that profit split is 70-30, at least you got 30%. And in an area where you know that your turn will come because that client needs your services. So you need to think about those things.
You know what? You just said a mouthful, Royce, but it's all critically important what you just said. And I hope people are taking notes, because what you just shared with the audience can make or break you in regards to how you enter the JV, how you operate in the JV, and how you may have to exit out of the JV. And that's something we didn't really touch upon yet. And that is, we're talking about how to formulate it. But, there's real scenarios that happen each and every day, just like a marriage. And, 50% of the marriages end up in divorce. What does that look like in your opinion? Like, how do you proactively, prepare for a potential exit of one of the
I don't know if you can actually prepare for it, right? Because the person that's looking to exit is never going to wave the flag to say, you know what, I need to get from underneath this contract. And if they are waving the flag, what comes to mind is why they're waving the flag. People don't, because we are people, we don't look to what's the end result. You want to get out? All right, how do we get you out? What happens is sometimes we get stuck in what I call a driveway or neutral. We never get out of the parking lot because we want to know why that person want to get out. Or yes, that person should get out because this is what the person didn't do or what the company promised to do. So now let me just say one other thing. We talk about joint ventures and we know that it's entity driven, but let's strike the word entity. Really, it's people driven, right? There's people. And so you're really talking about holding people accountable and having people fail you and having people breach the contract because they are not doing, or they're not holding their part. And so when you talk about exit plans, I think within the JV, there needs to be, somewhere between a 30 to 90 day window where there is consistent evaluation. And if a party is not holding their responsibility, then either by vote, right? Because there needs to be some voting if, let's say there's 3 entities and 2 of the entities feel that the third entity is not holding their weight and there is work there for that entity to do, then that's a problem. Or if it's 3 people, the same thing. Or that person decides that they want to leave on their own volition. There needs to be a window for which that can happen. So the company can kind of do a reorg. And what do we mean by reorg? 1, bring another company in for hire, not as a joint venture participant, but for hire to fill that void, be able to reinvent themselves to a degree, knowing that that void is there. Or if blood is not as bad as one think, recruit or keep the joint venture, have that person exit, and then maybe use that person as a consultant, right? Because maybe they're leaving for other reasons, not because of work product reason. Use them as a consultant where you still keep the facade of what you're able to do within the joint venture, but you're really contracting that work out. The problem with that is that usually when people leave is either because they realize that they can't form under this umbrella. And so even having a consulting relationship might be a little dangerous, or there is a group of people under the joint venture that's saying you have to leave because you're slow on the turnaround. So the question becomes, why would you want to get in bed again with someone that's slow on the turnaround? So there needs to be an exit plan within the joint venture contract agreement in and of itself, but it is never easy. People say, as you brought up divorces are, oh, there was an amicable divorce. There is no such thing. I don't care what you read or what you hear. There's nothing amicable about it. It's only amicable when both people land on their feet and they're living their separate lives and everybody's still having lollipops and sundaes on ice cream. That's it.
Well, I mean, that is something to consider, that there's always something that you sacrifice when there's a separation, but being intentional ahead of time of what that looks like. The small businesses and MWBEs that are listening and thinking about this, that one piece about having a window, like 90 days, 120 days, whatever that window is for an evaluation, would that window be something without any let's say, punitive damage to either party, and then past that time, if there's a separation, then you include a different kind of term for that agreement?
Yeah, I think when you talk about joint ventures, one of the things that you have to be mindful is that people want to leave with no less than what they came in with. So when you talk about punitive, how punitive can it be? How punitive can something truly turn out? I'm trying to get this light back on. How punitive can something truly become when you want to at least allow the person to leave whole as they came in? Usually there's going to be a struggle about, well, I contribute, and if there's compensation that's still in the accounts receivables, then I want part of that. So you have to work out that formula. Also, what you have to look for is the dangerous what we call disparities, right? You don't want that person to start to disparage your company and your entity. So when you talk about punitive, where does that really lead you? And so you may have to have another agreement. Kudos for the lawyers that have to write this next agreement that is similar to a non-disclosure, similar to a severance agreement or a separation agreement, where both parties or all parties agree not to disparage the other, not to make any negative comments about the other's work entity, work product, or how they do business, because that person, you may run into that person again in the field somewhere. As much as people want to say that, watch Black women work, or watch a woman work, or watch anybody work, or in this space, we're still few in numbers. And so you're going to bump into folks that you've had relationships with. And for better or for worse, what's going to happen is your experience with the joint venture is going to come to the forefront of your mind. You may not have the ability to have the understanding that, oh, I was dealing with this company, and the head of this company, when I was dealing with that person, was going through some very hard times. And what we really care about is the work product. If the work product's not there, then that's a blemish on your reputation. So I would stay away from the punitive. I would try to make it that everybody leaves as whole as they came in, and whatever's due them is due them. Because at the end of the day, you just want to dispose of the entity so you can move on. And that's the unfortunate part of terminating the relationship, but that should be the focus.
So now that was the spot that could be a little sticky. That could be a little like, but let's talk about some of the good spots, I should say, when it comes to the terms. When you're talking about profit and splitting profit and what that looks like and investing back, do attorneys advise on what those terms look like, or do you leave that to the JV to come up with how they want to split?
Well, if anybody came to me, any entity, any individual, and they wanted to talk about joining a JV or having a collaboration that warrants capital to be at foot, I think every company that wants to do that, they need to have what we call a capital contribution, whether it's 5,000, whether it's 10,000, whether it's 15,000, because that is the money that everyone is going to draw from to, one, promote the JV, two, deal with some of the services if they have a client. So, for instance, all three of us, we decide we want to get together. We want to service the WNBA. So we go to the WNBA, we want to service them. They say, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to do a marketing campaign on unlawful police stops. Well, only one of us have that experience in that realm. All right, so how do I start to do that? Am I doing that out of my own separate company money to promote that, to get that off the ground, and then the JV returns that money that I expend back to me, and we all gain a profit? Or am I able to go to what we call the capital contribution fund and say, all right, well, here's our first project. That's what we have the capital contribution fund for. I need to take 5,000 from there to help grow this campaign. If we had a choice between the two, I would suggest and advise that we have the capital contribution money laid to the side for that. Because I did not join a joint venture for me to then go in my pocket to develop a campaign that, yes, other entities will assist in bringing it to its fruition so we can service a client. just to get paid back. It feels better if it's coming from the joint venture entity rather than I have to wait to get reimbursed for something like that. So that is one of the pros that I would say, that if you walk into this agreement with your eyes open, you should do that. Another pro is that it's nothing like collaborating and working with others and having others sincerely give suggestions or make suggestions as you guys develop as a group to present this product. Most companies, I myself being an entrepreneur, Queen Strategies being entrepreneurs, work in a vacuum. Get assignments, they produce the work. There's no other space for people to collaborate, to talk. All right, do you think this is good? Do you think this is bad? How do you think I should shape this? And having that, not necessarily coworkers, but having advisors, having people that see, or at least trying to help you see yourself to the finish line, even though they may have a different vision, is invaluable. It is priceless. Everyone needs it. Despite the fact that I have my own practice, I still reach out to co-counsels to say, hey, can you read this for me? What do you think about this? Have those conversations. And that's what a joint venture can bring to the forefront, which can be very, 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 very valuable to the development of the joint venture and the development of oneself and how they do business. There's a lot to be said to watching others do business and staying silent and picking away the pros that you like that you can use for your own company.
So, Royce, I want to take a step back because what you just said was invaluable. But we started your answer in regards to the financial contribution, right? Mm-hmm. So, based on a JV structure, what financial considerations should be considered for future growth as well?
Well, one thing you should have is terms that talk about what are we going to do with the profits, right? Is a profit a money grab, where as soon as the money come in, everybody split up and that's it, I've made my profit? Or will there be some type of assignment of 10%, 15%, or the first 3 years, or the first 90 days, or until we reach $10,000, everything that we receive from this joint venture goes back into the capital contribution fund. Now, one would say, well, why would I want to do that? I'm working basically for free. Well, this is called the marathon thinking. The marathon thinking is that you will have these clients and develop more in the future. And now you have an economic base for which, one, you can meet the obligations of the current clients without going into your pocket separately as an entity, and two, that there is cash flow there, and if you needed to crack the piggy bank or do something of that nature, you can compensate each other at the year's end. But there needs to be some data point that says this is what we're going to do with the profits in order to develop the joint venture. Now, it is a joint venture, and unlike a marriage, you can cheat, right? So you can, and that's the reality of it, right? Joint ventures mean we're coming together to do this one thing, but I still have my own life. I still have my own business, right? And not knowing whether that person's own business is profitable enough, and that really they're relying on the joint venture to stay afloat just in the space that they're in, is conversations that are probably never had, but need to be had in order to really have a sincere understanding of what you're getting into.
So you raised the point of having these financial contributions, and you may get to a certain point. You use the example of 10,000, but let's say you get a really decent sized project, and you did not anticipate that you need X amount of working capital. Have capital to go above and beyond what you have in that little savings account that the JV has been contributing to. What does that look like in your opinion?
That looks like
who have the skin in the game and being willing to, do what needs to be done for the growth of the JV.
So in mentioning the capital contribution statement, and just bringing that more to life and making that more thorough. There's a part that says, one, we're going to contribute X day one, $5,000 everybody. Then it's the next level. Why? Why is that when we receive any type of compensation, we're going to put 10% in, and then Z or W is, well, if we have a project that calls for 50,000 and we only have 40,000, then we have to make another capital contribution, or there will be innately one of the parties that maybe might be in a better financial position to say, I will front that money, but yet I have to get reimbursed. But those are conversations that need to be had before anything is put in pen and paper. And, as tough as it may be, you have to play a little bit of what I call sharp eye Washington. You have to gleam into what your partners are saying to get a sense of what their financial stability is. And that changes over years. It just does. And as much as you're trying to be transparent and try to forecast the future so you're not putting yourself in financial straits and difficulties, it's hard to do. And people sometimes are embarrassed or ashamed. For instance, there's this company called Hickeys. And this company, Hickeys, I'm a partner in another company called ULace. And ULace is a company that allows you to lace up your shoes and sneakers in an untraditional way with what we call lace fragments. So it allows multiple colors in your sneakers. It allows you to slip on your sneakers as opposed to tie your sneakers. And so it is a lace that has brackets on the end that is covered by the lids of the sneaker that allows you to have multiple colors and multiple variations. Well, this other company called Hickeys developed an alternative to it made out of silicone. And so they would have these silicone braces that you put on to color it. So anybody that looks at sneakers, there's a difference between having a lace, actually shoelace that looks like a shoelace that gives you multiple colors and allows you to slip on rather than some silicone brace, right? So they go on, they're doing wonderful things. We're wondering why, even though we're first in the marketplace, we're not controlling the marketplace, and we're developing new products behind it. We're doing it for professional shoes. We're doing it for performance shoes. We're doing it for high tops. We're doing it for boots. We're doing tie-dye. We're doing tweed. We're doing all these colors. Great reviews. Everybody's loving it. Health organizations, mental facilities are calling us to have this product because it is useful in psychiatric and mental facilities, so people can't hang themselves, so they can't use their shoelaces to hang themselves, prisons, military. So, it's hitting its stride. But meanwhile, Hickeys have commercials. They're everywhere. People are confusing the brand. They're asking me about Hickeys. I'm like, no, we're not Hickeys. They're just everywhere. And so you think that they are doing very well. And I thought they were doing very well. Well, they're not. They're in bankruptcy because they were paying up to 45% of their profit to make the product. So if you're using 45% to make the product, what is your price point? And they were creating deals with other entities like Adidas, which you thought was like great. Like, oh man, look at it. They're with Adidas, they're with Nike, but those deals were profit losing deals. They were negative deals. They were making the deals just so they can use it as a marketing standpoint to give the impression that they had a stronghold of the marketplace, but they weren't making any money. Why do I say this? And why do I give this full long example? Is that when you're talking about joint ventures, people are coming in and they're telling you how great they are. And they're telling you how much money they make. And they tell you, or they allude to how much money they make. Or we assume because they have a nice sports coat and they have a nice jacket on that they're making a lot of money, right? Or they're making some money. And they tell you their client base. And you have no idea how much of that work is pro bono. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's when the pen drops. Like, all right, so you work with Nike. All right, so now we got this joint venture. Let's go to your contact in Nike. And one, you never get to the contact, or two, when you get to the contact, they're like, well, we're working with you pro bono, helping you develop your feet in this area. And your other two partners, you're looking like, what? Like, they're working in space pro bono. No. Pro bono are two words that they glide over my house, around my office. I do pro bono work, but pro and bono, they need to come by every 3 or 4 years, not every month. But you can see what the lack of transparency can do. And joint ventures will put you in that space where people have to be really transparent, what they can do, what they can be held accountable for financially and responsibility wise.
Awesome. I mean, this is just great content. Like you're going in. We told you part 2 was going to be really good. So everybody who's had questions about collaborations, joint ventures, everything that we've been talking about, Mr. Russell's been peeling every layer of what you should consider when thinking about it and how it can work. And the good news is you're developing it. So you don't have to use one template, but you have to have someone who can advise you. And I think that is one of the takeaways we want you to get. You have to engage. Well, we recommend that you engage with a credible attorney that can advise you and give you a variety of scenarios that you could look at and figure out which one works for you and what things would actually make sense when developing what that written word looks like versus the spoken word. So if we had 3 hours, I'm sure we could go through examples of examples in the public eye, as well as people we know that have had joint ventures that are flourishing and doing well, like Queen Strategy Partners. And there might be others that not so much, but there are lessons to learn no matter where you are on the spectrum. So that has been like, we have to do replay on this. And if you're watching the replay, put #replay, tell Mr. Russell that you appreciate what it is that he has shared. And you can definitely follow him on social media as well to see the things that he is doing. Get a copy of his book and some of the other programs, because he's knowledgeable, not just in the space where most people know him when we talk about criminal defense, but also in business. And he is an entrepreneur and has multiple streams of income. Hello, small businesses and MWBEs. That's the end.
Yeah.
Is that we're profitable or we don't need to be a business. So as we start to wind down the conversation, one of my final questions, and then I'll turn it over to Danielle. What other things? We talked about the profit. We've talked about the exit strategy. We've talked about samples of the terms that could be included in structuring your JV for our topic today. But what didn't we cover? What else is behind the veil? I think about the Wizard of Oz and you pull back that curtain, you see something else, Peter pattering on the wheel. What else should our small businesses and MWBEs be aware of when structuring their JV?
2 things. One is, how we're going to deal with disputes, whether we go into court or whether we go into arbitration. That's one we need to talk about, and I'll talk about that briefly. The other is, where is my heart in joining this venture? And that may seem not business-like to talk about where someone's heart is, but we can use another term, intentions. What's the end game for me in joining this joint venture? That needs to be paramount in one's brain before deciding to consummate the deal. What am I looking to get out of it? What am I looking to contribute to it? Can I hold myself accountable to it? Because one of the things about being an entrepreneur, at least on the legal side, and I would say this is true for any other side, is that you have to put the pressure on yourself to reap the profits. And I'll say that again, you have to put the pressure on yourself to reap the profits. No one's going to knock on your door and say, hey, what's going on with that book? I want to buy that book. If you're not putting pressure on yourself to market it and do a whole bunch of other things so you can reap the profit from it, whether that is financial, whether that's spiritual, educational, you name it. So there's this constant putting pressure on yourself. It's this constant, how can I make more money? How can I broaden this relationship? How can I expand my accessibility and my services in this relationship that only you will be thinking about? The client is not thinking about that. The client is not thinking about ways to give you more money. The client might be thinking about projects that they have to work on, but that doesn't necessarily mean giving you, Queen Strategy, more money. It's just projects they have to work on. You have to work on the project and then think about what is this client missing that we can present, that we can also provide, which means more revenue, more profit, more exposure, more security in having this client. And so one of the things you have to think about is what am I getting out of this? Why am I going into this? What is the end game? So where's my heart? So that's one. And we talked about it more in a structural way, but this is just more in a humane way. Two is when we talk about disputes, how do we want this resolved? Do we want this resolved by way of mediation, where parties come together and there is one person that facilitates a meeting of the minds that everybody is satisfied with and everybody can leave with? Or are we doing something where it's like an arbitration, which is a quasi-judicial type of forum where parties bring all their documents, they present all their arguments to a panel of three or a panel of one, and that one person makes a decision as to who's right and who's wrong, and that is a final decision. Obviously, in America, no decision is final. There's always an appeal somewhere that you can do something, but for most part, most courts will honor the decision of the arbitrator that is mutually selected by all to bring a complaint or dispute before. Or you can go to court. And you can see now in COVID times, you'll be on a long list of cases that probably will not get seen for a very, very long time. And what does that do for your business? And how does that paralyze your ability to move forward? So I would always say that there needs to be a direct clause that talks about how do we deal with disputes. I am a fan of mediation and arbitration, what they call alternative dispute resolution forums. Because there was a immediate, it fits within the judicial economy. You're not on a long list, and it humanizes to a degree what the dispute is, and I think it's faster.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Danielle with the last question today. This has been great. We're going to have to make sure everybody replays this one. This was a great episode today.
So, I know you talked about this, Royce, and you may feel like you answered it, but I'm just rephrasing it in a little different way because you are just dropping like some knowledge bombs this morning. So what is the one thing that is critically important for JVs to safeguard against?
Oh, well, there's two. And one, I did talk about it, and the other is something new. The first, which I talked about earlier, is just making sure that there is no disparaging remarks that are made if the JV dissolves. That's key, right? Because what people say and what people tell other people will always outlive any entity. And so you want to really hold on to that, even if you grit your teeth and you're like, this person really did not do their part. You want to make sure that that there's only positive words that should be spoken about anyone. You can never prevent that from happening and that prevent someone from being disparaging to a 100% degree, but you want to do the best you can in that. So that's one. Two is that you want to, as best as you can, protect the JV from having anybody exploit their intellectual property. How you do business. It's just, I know attorneys that have no legal staff whatsoever. And what they do is that they farm their work out overseas. India is a great place. They have, folks type up all day, all night, send it back to you. They're very familiar with American documents. So they have no support staff and they use overseas workers. That's good and that works. But that's a little bit of intellectual property that probably an attorney does not want the world to know. They want you to think either they're doing the work all themselves, typing every line, or they have paralegals in the paralegal system that is here in their office or working virtually that they work with. And in actuality, they might be working with someone overseas. So I bring that example up because it is quote unquote intellectual property. It is how you do business. It is something that is very relevant and germane to your business that you do not want to get out. So in a joint venture, there will be those moments where intellectual property will be exposed, whether it is how your company does business in and of itself, the entity, or whether how the JV does business in and of itself, that entity. And you want to make sure that that intellectual property is safeguarded. And so you might need a non-disclosure type of paragraph that speaks to, can't speak, can't tell, as you say, when you walk into certain stores, you touch, you buy. So can't speak, can't tell clauses within the actual JV agreement.
Well, that is awesome. Danielle, I know you have some thoughts that you want to share as we close our show today, but I just want to remind everybody we're here the first and third Tuesday of every month. So our next show is the top of May. I can't believe May is almost here. So May 4th, we'll be back again with another episode of From the Ground Up, real-time issues with real-time solutions for MWBEs and small businesses. This has been a great part 2 to how to structure your JV. Thank you so much, Mr. Royce Russell Esquire, for your brilliance that you shared with us today. We want folks to know how to connect with you at roycerussell.com or roycerussellesq.com, correct?
Correct, or r2esq.com.
Awesome. So if you want more information about what he does or how he can be a benefit to you, definitely visit roycerussellesquire.com. And thank you for being a part of From the Ground Up. Over to my beautiful co-host, Danielle Douglas, who will close us out for the day and get us on our way.
So, I always say this, knowledge is power, but wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. So Mr. Royce Russell, he dropped some knowledge bombs this morning. He talked about the spoken word, but I do believe the spoken word was on point this morning. The point is, what are you going to do with it? So if you're thinking about JVs, I will implore you to please listen to our show this morning again, because he dropped so much information this morning that I bet you didn't capture everything. So you need to hear it again. So repetition is the mother of all knowledge, as they say. So with that said, we are looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. We are excited about continuing to take this ride with you. We're going to continue to show up, and we just ask that you continue to show up also. So we're looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Until then, make it happen, be productive, and have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.